Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about records that aren't exactly what they say they are. And that is true for a lot of the recordings of the early days. More often than not, a recording would be made by an individual uh, portraying the name that would be on there. There were a lot of political recordings made, and many times the political personage on the record was not really that individual, it was more of a studio performer. One of the greatest examples of this were a series of recordings that came out over the years after the assassination of William McKinley. Victor, Columbia, Imperial, Edison all had recordings of the president's last speech at the Pan American exhibition of 1901. However, I'm sorry to tell you that they are not William McKinley. None of them are William McKinley. First off, there is film of the event, and there was no recording device nearby. And you have to remember, as we all know, with the recording devices of the time, that horn had to be right next to him. So he didn't do that. It's very hard to record an audience cheering, which is not on many of the recordings themselves. And so there were cylinders and discs that appeared for the next 10 years after his assassination with that last speech, or parts of it. Like here's an example. There's so many different ones, but this is an Oxford. And of course, it's an Oxford taken from a Columbia master. Therefore, it is Harry Spencer. It's Harry Spencer doing the speech. Now, Len Spencer, Harry Spencer, and occasionally Arthur Collins made recordings of William McKinley. Now, one of the things I found most interesting, I've been listening on the internet here, on YouTube, and of course they sit there and say they have a recording of Grover Cleveland. I wish it was, but it is not. There's a recording of William McKinley speaking from his porch. I wish it was, but it is not. It's like the Walt Whitman cylinder. I wish it was, but it's not. Harry Spencer did most of the William McKinley recordings. There are no recordings of William McKinley, just film. There is a recording of Benjamin Harrison speaking. It was done on a Bettini cylinder. Grover Cleveland did not make a record. And for those previous, of course, Rutherford B. Hayes and James A. Garfield did make recordings, but on foil. And those have long since been lost. So it's unfortunate, but many of the great people we think we know what they sound like, we don't know what they sound like. And so unfortunately, that's the way it is in the early days of recording. One of the great examples of voices we don't know, which I found kind of interesting when I was doing research on this, is Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. Hal Holbrook has made a career of impersonating Mark Twain. When I was reading the liner notes of his album years ago, it said that Hal Holbrook learned to talk like Mark Twain by listening to his recordings. I'm sorry to say that there does not exist a recording of Mark Twain, so we don't know what he sounded like. But my guess is that he sounds a lot like Hal Holbrook. Um, so remember this in some of the early recordings, and if you see something or see something advertised or marketed as President McKinley's last speech, or any great individual of the 19th century, be wary. There are examples. Chauncey Depew made his own records. Joseph Jefferson made his own records. But a lot of other people, sadly, did not.